All right, we are live. Okay, let's go to basketball news. Y'all see it? There we go. I see it now. So if y'all can go right to basketball news and then retweet it, you'll see us. You see the whole panel live, and then that's how you see it. You see it, Chris?
Yep.
All right, cool. We are live. Well, thank you all for joining us today, the last day of Black History Month. So I want to say thank you to basketballnews.com for doing this, for being, because not everybody is really that comfortable with this conversation. So I definitely got to give a shout out to basketballnews.com. Fly TV, Marlon and Dave, love y'all for what y'all do. We've been working together. So I'm looking forward to this discussion. I've interviewed it's about everybody here for my new book, Police Brutality and White Supremacy, the Fight Against American Traditions. And there was so much that I, delved into in the book. So making it a big discussion is just the next logical step. So let me do a quick introduction of everybody. At the top, right next to me, you have Mr. Kori McCoy. He is the brother of Willie McCoy. To refresh everybody's memory real quickly, his brother was killed. He was asleep in a car at a Taco Bell in Vallejo, and the police came with guns blazing with no need or reason to. And they're unfortunately getting away with it. So this is Kori McCoy, his brother. It's Craig Hodges, the legend. I have so much respect for this man. Been following him since I was younger, reading about him, and I've had a chance to meet him and become friends and partners in this. And we've been fighting together for a long time on different projects and supporting each other. Much respect to you, Craig. Appreciate you. Definitely, Mr. Kenneth Chamberlain Jr. I'm sure everybody has seen the movie about his father, the killing of Kenneth Chamberlain. It was an amazing movie that was also disturbing because of the storyline, but it was depicted so brilliantly, and the acting was so amazing. It was so many different emotions. But everybody, I'd really encourage to go see that movie if you haven't seen it yet, because it really brings to life what actually happened. So thank you for joining us today. This is his son. And we have the NBA analyst extraordinaire, Mr. Chris Broussard. I've known this brother for the longest. And so I want to start with you, Chris. It's interesting because, whenever I called you throughout the years, you've been immediately there. We did a Black Lives Matter panel in New York right after the same year that Eric Garner was killed. And there was All-Star Weekend that was going on in New York. And a lot of people don't know how much pushback I got for wanting to do a Black Lives Matter panel during NBA All-Star Weekend at that time in New York. The NYPD was pressuring the church not to do it. Shout out to Canaan Baptist Church for standing up and saying that they were going to do it regardless. And Chris Broussard came right down. I think a little bit after that, I called you and said that I was going to go to Rikers Island and bring a group to Rikers Island. He said, yep, let count me in. I was like, wait, I ain't even told you the details yet. I didn't tell you. He was like, I don't need to know those details. I'm supporting you. So we've been really supporting each other for the longest. He has a great organization called King, the King Movement, everything that you're doing. And I want to start with you with this because it's interesting. Just today, I just posted what Javaris Fulton said to me, who is Trayvon Martin's brother. We just passed the 10-year anniversary of Trayvon Martin being killed. And it's amazing that it's been 10 years. But this is something that he said to me when I interviewed him for my previous book, We Matter, Athletes and Activism. So this is what he said. He said, I don't know if people know this, but in the beginning, the news outlets didn't want to run the story. We had to literally fight for this to be a story. We had to almost beg and plead for local news to cover what happened to my brother, and they didn't want to do it. But when athletes started talking about it on their various social media, and when they took that picture in the hoodies, it almost forced the media to cover it, and it forced people from around the country to take notice because these athletes were talking so passionately about this. So if it weren't for you guys, I honestly think people would have never heard the name Trayvon Martin. Now that's what he's saying to me. And when he said it, I was so, I'm sitting there looking at him. This was before COVID, and I'm looking at him face to face, and he's saying all these things, tears welling up in his eyes, talking about it, how thankful he is to athletes for using their platforms. What is your response when you hear that, in contrast with so many people who tell athletes to just stay in your place, shut up and dribble? You don't invade our sanctuary, of sports with your opinions. What do you think when you hear that, Chris?
Well, I think it speaks to the power of Black athletes. And it's a power that has been utilized in many ways, as this is an example of it, getting the notice out there about Trayvon Martin. But it's also a power that is largely untapped. Like I think, and I'm obviously Craig has dealt with this in the past, our athletes haven't even tapped the potential that they could have as far as power to change things in this country. And I watched the killing of Kenneth Chamberlain, and man, my heart goes out to you, Kenneth Jr., because that was just a heart-wrenching story and very upsetting. And it was during the Obama presidency, when we had actually had a Black president, and we have many Black police commissioners, and it still happened, and justice still was not served. And so with all due respect to like politicians and lawyers and many other people who are doing great things on behalf of the Black community, I think it's very arguable that Black athletes, and to a lesser degree Black entertainers, may have the most power of Black people in this country. I don't believe that we would be as far as we are right now if we weren't such great athletes and entertainers. I'm gonna keep it real. Like our Black people's excellence and dominance of sports and entertainment has to a certain degree endeared us to America. And look, let's be honest, most of our time here, if not all of it, America's just been interested in us for what it could get out of us, right? How it could use us. And our athletes bring an entertainment, and they bring money, and they bring a lot to America to enhance American life and culture. And so I think all of that gives our athletes, Black athletes, in my opinion, are the most beloved, most well-connected to corporate America, billionaires and these billion-dollar corporations, and the most irreplaceable African Americans in the country. Like, you can't replace LeBron James.
Right.
You can't replace Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson. I contend that if a superstar had done what Colin Kaepernick did, Pat Mahomes, Cam Newton during his prime, Micah Parsons now with the Cowboys, if somebody of that caliber, even Kaepernick, when he was a superstar a few years earlier, if he had done what he did, he'd still be in the league. There's no question about it. But he was at that point a backup, a reserve. And even though he still was qualified to play in the league and should have been good, was good enough to still play in the league, he wasn't a superstar. You can bring in another average quarterback to replace him. So I think that what Trayvon Martin's brother said just speaks to the power that Black athletes have. And I would like to see us, our Black athletes, use that power to press the corporations that want them to endorse their products, and many other things to get real change made. I think there should be, Etan, an organization for African American athletes across sports, where it was a legitimate organization, because every field of endeavor has a Black advocacy group. I'm a part of the National Association of Black Journalists. They have Black accountants. The Black National Medical Association is for Black doctors, Black Lawyers Association. Every field of endeavor except sports and entertainment, where our overall, those are our wealthiest African Americans.
Mhm.
And I'm not trying to say it needs to be a players association. You have those to represent the players, but
That's
they
different.
obviously represent players who aren't black. And
Right.
so it can only go so far in what they do that's black. But
Right.
we need an advocacy group for black athletes that's not really about protecting the athletes as much as it is about how can the athletes come together to utilize their power and their connections. And even to a real small degree, it's not about their money so much, but their power, their prestige, their connections to help the masses of black people.
And I couldn't agree more, Chris. And I think that's a great segue into Mr. Craig Hodges. In my book, Police Brutality and White Supremacy, the fight against American traditions, we talked about that dynamic that you're talking about now. And I made a reference to like a correlation to the movie that had just come out, a little bit before we did that interview, One Night in Miami.
Yes.
And so I talked about how you saw the depiction of Malcolm X and with Sam Cooke, and how much he loved Sam Cooke. They were brothers, you know what I mean? But he was trying to push him to use his voice a little bit more. And you saw the frustration that Malcolm X had with him, because he was like, you play in these, all white venues. You have this access that we don't have. You have this ability, you're beloved, you're endeared, all the things that you just said, Chris, about how black athletes are, cherished, in mainstream America. And he said, but you're not bringing the issues of the community to those places. And he was frustrated with it. Now, I immediately, seeing that, thought of Craig Hodges. And I said, when you were playing, with the Bulls, it was right around the time, and we talked about this in the book, it was right around the time after Rodney King happened and the verdict happened and LA was up in flames and all these things were going on. And then you had the NBA finals, and you were talking about I was making the correlation, like, Malcolm X to Sam Cooke, and you to MJ, as far as just wanted to push him to do more. Now, a lot of people didn't understand it and wrote it like, oh, Craig Hodges is beefing with MJ. He was like, no, it had nothing to do with a beef. That's my brother. You know what I mean? I just understand the power that he had. And it was a great discussion that we had, but talk about that aspect of it, because and the great power that the athlete voice can have.
Well, first of all, just thanking Almighty God for giving us an opportunity to fellowship and, share this information with the people. And for me, when we look at it, it's part and parcel, brother. It's not, I don't make any disconnection from what happened to Brother Chamberlain's father to what happened to Trayvon Martin to what happened, with that crazy verdict we had with the white woman that shot our brother down in Georgia. So it's, for me, it's we're at that point in our history where we truly have to define who's who among us. And I think that when we look at our athletes and our entertainers, it's a divine inheritance that we have. And those of us who have taken that position of being part of a movement that is much older than us, that goes back to ancient times, that, it's time for us to realize who we truly are. And from an athletic standpoint, there's no doubt the power that, LeBron James has. There's no doubt of the power that Michael Jordan still has. There's no doubt of the power that Tiger Woods has. So, the power is within us. But however, the critical part I think that we miss oftentimes is the agency, that agent factor that is the static between us and our athletes, that, we probably the only people on the face of the earth that have our best and brightest represented by somebody outside of us. So when we look at the representation and the collaboration of athletes coming together, brother, that's what it was about in 1990, brother, but the difference is, and I was writing some notes as we were speaking, the difference in time, the difference in Colin Kaepernick with the social media, and the difference in, had a blessing to get a chance to sit down with Dr. John Carlos and him tell me how important in 1968, there was a movement and they were caught up into a movement. So it wasn't any disconnection between the black bus driver and the black, athlete. So there was a certain pressure that was coming on everybody from the same position, where today pressure is coming from different places. So, you look at what the model that has been given, the model, when you look at just the success of a Donald Trump, everybody want to be a billionaire. So everybody, so oftentimes we be quiet when we know that those who could speak on our behalf, who are millionaires, are setting an agenda with those who are opposed to our very rise. So I don't even, at one point in time, brother, in all honesty, at one point in time, it was like I thought athletes and entertainers was the key to our reparation type thing. But now when I see what's happening today in the world on the geopolitical level, I see the importance of Africa. I see the importance of African minerals. I see the importance of, the very social fabric of Western civilization rests on the back of African minerals. So when we talk about this whole athletes and entertainers in America and see, that's another thing, brother. I just want us to come to the realization who we are, and we not black, ain't no black land. So we have to get to the fact that land and nationality and who we are and who we've been for thousands and thousands of years, it hasn't changed. So I look to Africa and how we can connect our athletes and entertainers as well as our accountants, lawyers, because once again, we are the brightest in as far as not just basketball and everything they got in this country. We've excelled at. So I don't look at it as a thing where it's just one sector. It's that unity factor and us standing up to the point of who we are and the struggles that our ancestors went through. And we're blessed to be the divine inheritance.
And I love the way you made that point in the book as well, as far as, knowing your roots and being connected to your roots. Because when you're connected, you see everything differently in a different type of a light. You know what I mean? It's like the shade isn't closed when you're connected. When you're not connected, you're on like a conveyor belt almost. Like you don't even know, what's happening or realize what's happening around. It's just everything is dollar signs.
Yeah,
and that's the part. Yes, and I thought you brilliantly laid that out. And I want to talk about these two cases in particular for a lot of different reasons. First of all, they're very connected. And a lot of times people say want to be solution oriented. Well, there are solutions to the issues that we are facing. No a lot of people try to act as if, well, it's this big grandiose thing, and no, it really isn't. There are solutions that we can put in place that would stop different things from happening. And I want to start with you, Mr. Chamberlain Jr. It's going to the story of your father, and you can, everybody's seen the movie, and I think it should win an Oscar or whatever movies win. It should win something, because it was so brilliantly depicted, but also painful. But it also could have been avoided, and that's the part that is, with the. I want to just give you the floor to explain everything, and then explain what you're pushing for as far as change to happen. So what happened to your father doesn't continue happening on a regular basis.
Okay. Well, first I just want to say it's truly an honor to even be on this, having this discussion with you guys. I had spoken to Etan earlier, and I explained to him that for years, I've been fighting this fight for a decade now. And to try to get people to come help me in the city of White Plains around the extrajudicial killing or summary execution of my father, it just fell on deaf ears. Nobody wanted to come to help me. So to have people such as yourselves using your platforms, using your celebrity to say, hey, this is wrong and we need to do something, I don't want to get emotional, but sometimes I can't help it when you think about the fight that I've been in for so long, and how many days I sat on the edge of my bed with tears in my eyes, not understanding why people won't help me, when they know what happened was criminal. But I just want to say thank you to you guys. On November 19, 2011, my father was shot and killed by members of the White Plains Police Department when he inadvertently triggered his life aid pendant that he wore around his neck. he suffered from a heart condition and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. It was very difficult for my father to even walk up a flight of stairs without having to use a rescue inhaler. That morning that he triggered his alarm, the monitoring station attempted to reach him, but was unsuccessful. They then contacted White Plains Police. They are first responders. They did come to my father's apartment in a housing complex and knocked on the door. My father came to the door. He said he was okay, and then he didn't call him. You would have thought that would have been enough, but from that point, they began what I consider to be an assault on my father. For 90 minutes, they would yell at him. They would scream at him. They would mock his military service. At one point, you hear my father say to them in the audio, "I'm telling you I'm okay." And the response from the police officer is an expletive. "I don't give a F," and then followed by the N-word. They eventually take the door off its hinges. They fire an electronic taser at him, beanbag shotgun 4 times, and then they fire live rounds at him, alleging that he posed an imminent threat to life or well-being. Even when that happened, I said, if my father did anything to cause these officers to have to use deadly physical force, then I would walk away. It was at that time that I received a call from the monitoring station who said to me, "We recorded the entire event." And this is when we heard it. Of course, the DA's office quickly subpoenaed it, and said, no, we need it. And interestingly enough, I can remember sitting in the DA's office and we were listening to the audio, and you hear the officer say, "I don't give a F, N-word, open the door." And we said, "Play that again." And it was almost like the DA was oblivious to what we just heard. We said, they said, "Why? What did you hear?" And all of us in the room repeated what we heard. So, and the DA, of course, at that time, her name was Janet DeFiore. She is now the New York State Chief Judge of the Court of Appeals. She promised a full and fair investigation into the killing of my father. But in May of 2012, she came back with no true bill. And we've all heard this, if I may paraphrase, where they say after an exhaustive investigation, the grand jury has decided that there is not sufficient enough evidence to charge the officer in the killing of, and you can add the last name at that point. So, of course, they asked the district attorney, well, what about the racial slur that was hurled at Mr. Chamberlain moments before he was killed? She said, yes, it was used and it shouldn't be used, but she justified it. She said it was used as a tactic to distract my father.
What?
I have never in my life heard such a thing, that a racial slur was used to distract someone. So then, of course, we move forward civilly. Now, when you move forward civilly, people think it's about money. It's monetary. Oh, they're just trying to get a dime. And we're saying, no, not at all. What this allows now is for my attorneys, our investigators, to all look at the case in its totality and say, okay, what was submitted, what wasn't submitted, what did they hide, all of these different things. It wasn't until we got to civil court that I found out that my father was hit with 4 beanbags. He was hit with one in the stomach, one in his leg, one in his shoulder, which spun him, and the last shot hit him in the back. So how was he an imminent threat if he's getting shot in the back? You see, so these narratives that they put out there are to discourage you, and for people who don't fact find, you're just saying, oh, well, the police said this is what happened, but that's their version of events. So we were sitting in court, and I watched this judge in federal court basically take my entire case and throw it out, where I had to say to my attorneys, even then, we need to start looking at the appeal process now, because there's no way we're going to win. She brought it down to the final seconds before the police officer pulled the trigger, like 2 or 3 seconds. So, of course, they found for the city of White Plains in the wrongful death. We then filed an appeal. And in 2020 of June, we won that appeal from the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. And one of the more powerful statements in that opinion was where the judge said, one of the judges said, instead of treating Mr. Chamberlain like a critically ill patient, you treated him like a criminal suspect.
That's right.
So we're back in court. We're awaiting summary judgment right now because once again, the city is still trying to get the case thrown out. But during all of this time, from 10 years, you know, I have, first, let me say, I've now had an opportunity to actually mourn my father's death because I have been fighting this entire time. And as I said earlier, no one came to White Plains, New York to help my family. So it was me trying to put together a blueprint. You know, so I often sit back when people talk about, for instance, George Floyd, and people say, oh, well, you have the blueprint now. I said, absolutely not. We don't have a blueprint. That is not a blueprint. What you saw is a small amount of accountability, but that's not a blueprint on fighting these types of killings. And if you look at the rates of shootings from last year to this year, it hasn't changed. They're still neck and neck. There is no change. So the big deal, or the biggest issue here, is the lack of accountability. So in White Plains, New York, I've created the Westchester Coalition for Police Reform. And we are out here addressing the issues around policing. We are holding panel discussions, and we say not what to do if you're stopped by law enforcement, but how do you survive a law enforcement encounter? Because that is very important. I've sat on the Westchester County Reimagining and Reinventing Police Reform Task Force out here. And we have put together something called Project Alliance, where you have individuals who now are social workers that are part of the police department, that they're routing these calls. So if you're dealing with individuals with mental health issues, and police officers are not mental health professionals, so why are you responding to a mental health call? Right. Yeah. So these are things that we're looking at, and some of the things that we're trying to put in place. Of course, we all talk about civilian complaint review boards, but you know they're useless if they don't have subpoena power, if they don't have teeth. If I cannot compel you to speak, then what's the point? That's like me saying to any one of you, you can watch my child, but don't discipline my child if my child does anything wrong. So we're standing from the outside looking in. And another thing that we're looking at is the licensing of police officers. So just like an attorney should be licensed, a doctor is licensed, social workers are licensed, and if you are found guilty of anything criminal, you lose your license and you cannot practice anywhere else in this country. So these are some of the things that we're looking at, and some of the things that we're trying to push right now. And, you know, again, I just want to say thank you guys for allowing me to be on this platform, to even have this dialogue with you guys, because hopefully it's going to open the eyes of people who see these things happening and stop with this attitude of it's not my problem until it's my problem.
Teach.
I want to say, you know, you're thinking, and I hear that so many times from the family, impacted family members, you know, thanking me for, you know, helping them, and it's like you shouldn't be thanking me. You know what I mean? Like it's something that everybody should be doing. You should have compassion, you know, and understand that this level of injustice is not tolerable. And that's one of the things that you listed as far as the licensing for police. Why are police called if they're not trained to be able to deal with a mental health crisis or a wellness check? Like, why are they the ones called? Like, these are things that we can correct in the way that we police that would keep a lot of these things from happening, because they wouldn't be the ones that are sent. And it's you know, in my book, I interviewed different police officers, former police officers as well. And one of the person I interviewed was Mr. Joe Ested. You know, Kori, you know Joe Ested, and he was actually the former police union VP. And he had some great things that he laid out about, you know, when a city is sued, that you're not suing the city, you're suing the actual officer, and the officer is responsible to get his own insurance. Like you have somebody, so you're suing their insurance, and then their premiums go up, so they have to figure out how they conduct themselves because it affects their bottom line. Right now, it doesn't affect them. You know what I mean? And the city pays it out, brushes on the table, and they go on to the next thing. That's not justice, especially like you said, Mr. Chamberlain Jr., that the person can get hired again. But once you breach that license, then you can no longer be rehired. These are common sense things that should be in place that we have to push for. And so on your panels that you do, you know, I want to connect you with different athletes that can stand with you. Different people that can stand with you. You're up in White Plains. There are many athletes that are from upstate New York, that are from, you know what I mean, around there that it's an easy commute for them to be able to stand with you. So that's part of what I want to do. Mr. McCoy, you know, when you were having the feedback that I'm getting from your interview in particular, you know, about your brother Willie, is that people didn't know the breakdown of what happened because they only knew the police version. And the version of the actuality that no gun was ever found, even though the police said there was a gun. No gun was ever, the person never called and said there was a gun. They said he was asleep. And the way that the police, like the Vallejo police, changed it. Like, and I just want to say that, and I want to turn the floor to you. You mentioned George Floyd and how people are saying that now it's a what word did you use? A blueprint, right? But people have to understand, and this is something that Stephen Jackson pointed out when I interviewed him for the book. If the young sister Darnella Frazier hadn't whipped out her camera phone, we never would have heard of George Floyd. Like, they had already written up the report. It was done. It was over with. They said George Floyd resisted arrest. They didn't mention anything about Derek Chauvin putting his knee in. They said he just died. And it was done. It was over with. Then once the video came out, then they went back and had to recant everything. And then you saw it, and it took protests from all around the country for them to reopen it. And you took athletes, what Stephen Jackson did, you know, and everybody knows Stephen Jackson for other stuff in the NBA. But what he did there was bring national attention to something that wasn't getting the national attention. And that's the power of the athlete voice. And that's why I'm always pushing. You know, I'm an old retired athlete now, but that's why I'm always pushing for athletes to continue using their voice because of the power that it has. So that's one of the main objectives that I have in putting this together, you know, and writing the books and things like that, to making that connection. So, Mr. McCoy, can you please explain what happened to your brother and the ongoing fight that you're doing right now with the Vallejo police, the cover up, the badge bending, the corruption, everything? Just lay it all out.
Absolutely. And Etan, I would be remiss not to thank you once again for providing your platform, doing the right thing by your platforms. I think that it needs to be mentioned that a lot of people have platforms, a lot of people in positions where they're famous and they can get their word out, but it's not always for the right reasons. And you're someone that you do what you do for the impacted families, for the culture, for the people, for our people, for the right reasons. And it's all based around telling the truth.
Teach.
And I'm all about truth telling when it comes to what happened to my brother back on February 9th of 2019. I think it's important to say that, in my opinion, our society, the majority of us have been conditioned mentally to accept whatever narrative comes from our authority figures, whether that be our city officials, our politicians, and so forth. And we're so conditioned to accept whatever comes out of their mouth as the truth. And our media catches on to that. And they put things out there from these authority figures as if it is the gospel. So back on February 9th of 2019, my younger brother, Willie, had either fallen asleep, he was unconscious, we're not exactly sure, but he was non-responsive in the drive-through line of a Taco Bell in Vallejo, California. Multiple people from Taco Bell employees to food delivery drivers that were behind him, honking their horns because the line is not moving, went to his window of the side of the car, looking in, tapping on the window. He continued to be unresponsive. No one ever at any time said they saw a gun in his lap, as was claimed later by the police. So a call went out, not for there's a man with a gun in his lap, but there's a man unconscious that is non-responsive, and the words that were used in the 911 call was for a wellness check. What ended up happening was Vallejo police showed up. And there's video, I know Etan, one of the things I really respected about him before we even were introduced and connected a couple years back was that he had already taken the time to do his research. And he had many of the same questions that myself and people within my family had as it pertained to the narrative that was being put out. And so in the video, what you see are 6 police officers surrounding my brother's car, carrying on a casual conversation for upwards of 15 minutes. The words are being used, I don't want to give him a chance. If he moves, you know what to do. At the time, it's somewhat confusing because in the video, you have the police putting their subtitles along the bottom, trying to lead you in a certain direction of what it is that you're seeing. Mm-hmm. After a period of time, you see my brother move. His left hand comes up to scratch his shoulder. Probably within a second of that, the 6 officers unleashed 55 rounds, never announcing themselves as police officers. 38 rounds hit my brother, 13 of which were fatal. This all took place in 3.5 seconds. In the aftermath of this, there was what I call, as you can see in the video, command staff gathering up every police officer on scene. They tell everybody to cut sound, and they huddle up, and what they do is, in my opinion, they're calling the play like a football huddle, and they're setting the narrative, manipulating the crime scene. These are the stories we're going to tell. This is how it happened, and so forth. I don't want to get long-winded because there's so much I could fall into and kind of get sidetracked. But the overview of it is that they claim that my brother had a gun. There are 37 different body cam videos. You can't see a gun in any of them. It's been 3 years since my brother's death. Myself and other family members early on had the opportunity to sit with the former police chief and many of his cronies, command staff, where they're trying to stop the video as we're watching it and tell us what it is that we're seeing. In the aftermath of this happening, there was a command staff member by the name of Captain John Whitney who ended up whistleblowing against the Vallejo Police Department. There are many people that were saying, well, why is your family saying that, so what you're saying is people were having a hard time wrapping their mind around. So if there's no gun, what are you telling us? That they just executed this man? And my family was like, yes, that is what we're trying to tell you. As I'm sitting here explaining this, I feel a need to let everyone know that I speak not just for Willie, but the other impacted families and lost brothers of Vallejo, as there have been 19 police kills in the city of Vallejo just in the last 10 years, over 30 kills, close to 40 in the last 2 decades. We're talking about officers with multiple kills on their resume. As I get back to John Whitney, the whistleblower, he is the second, or at the time, was the second highest ranking official in the Vallejo Police Department. He attempted to bring to the attention of the brass of the chief that there was a tradition going on within the Vallejo Police Department for a better part of 2 decades known as badge bending, where an internal gang of police officers, a clique, a special clique of police officers would bend one of the 6 tips of their badges when they would get a kill on a civilian. We're talking about unarmed civilians, not civilians in the midst of committing any type of a crime. This was a gang initiation into a police gang. We know through federal testimony from Captain Whitney that the morning after my brother was murdered, there were police officers that had done this murder, along with people that were in command staff that had interviewed them in the parking lot, drinking beer, celebrating, discussing when they were going to get the tip on their badge. There was back when Captain Whitney brought this to the attention of the former chief, there was a badge inspection done at the time where just the officers that were on duty in the building at that time, they did a badge inspection. There were more than a dozen badges brought back to the chief, some with single bends in a badge, some with multiple bends. And the way the chief decided to deal with it was, we're going to give these badges back to these officers, and not, because we can't have this show up on a police invoice. This is all in federal testimony. So what I'm speaking to is not things that I'm assuming or that I'm piecing together. These are things that people that are interested, that want to do their homework. These are federal testimony. As I speak right now, the new police chief of Vallejo is sitting on a badge bending investigation. He claims that the city attorney is not allowing him to release it to the public. It's one of several documents that we're requesting in our civil litigation. Speaking to what Mr. Chamberlain had to say, I think it's so important when he spoke about the civil litigation being so much more important than the money. You can't put a price on Willie McCoy's life. It's so much bigger than the money. The civil litigation allows us to get things documented in federal court that took place. What people need to understand is that when these police officers and their co-workers who are their command staffs, and I need people to understand, in Vallejo, we had an officer that killed 3 people in a 5-month period. What they did with this officer was they promoted him to command staff, where now he wasn't on the street, so he hopefully wouldn't kill anyone, but he was in a position to now be the decision maker when officers would end up with a kill that would take place. He's now in a position to be the decision maker and helping them write their police reports. People need to know that police reports that are written have no legal standing in a court of law, but these are the same police reports that they use to clear their officers. This is why when we get an opportunity to depose these same officers in our civil trial, the officers' stories that they will give then will not match up at all to what they stated in the police report. It is very thick out here in Vallejo. It's really been an ongoing criminal enterprise. We have a district attorney in Krishna Abrams who has been in office since 2014. She has never prosecuted a police officer for an officer-involved shooting. She is currently married to a command staff member, a Solano County sheriff. So it's kind of a conflict of interest, we believe. She recused herself from rendering any decision in my brother's case because she basically is compromised. And so I think Etan and I, he had kind of, my thinking was always that the only way you're going to stop these police murders from happening, because people need to understand, I know that I've heard Mr. Chamberlain say many times before, police officers lie. Yes, they lie. They literally lie. And I'm here to tell you that my family and many of the families in Vallejo, we have been called conspiracy theorists, lunatic fringe, because it is so difficult for you to wrap your mind around the fact that a police officer would literally go out, hunt someone down, or in essence, find a situation that they could create a circumstance in which then they could try to justify murdering someone, strictly to join a police gang or to gain notches in a police gang. And we know from interacting with other families that it's not just in Vallejo, it's all over the country.
That's right.
You have police gangs in other parts of the country that they don't bend badges, but they give themselves certain markages, whether it be with tattoos or other type of things. And so people need to open up their eyes to the fact that these things are happening. We don't, like, a lot of people like to say that, you know, it's a couple bad apples in these police departments. And I'm here to tell you that Vallejo, California, it's not just a couple bad apples. It's a whole orchard of rotten apples. And I used to feel that the only way we're going to stop, and I still do feel that you're going to get these officers to change their what they do, is through the accountability, but not the accountability of a slap on the wrist.
No.
Life in prison, the death penalty, because what they did to my brother was capital murder, premeditated. One of our, and I know I'm getting a little long-winded, I'm going to give it back to you, Etan, but just to let you guys know really quickly, the judge in our federal trial initially signed off on the charge of conspiracy to commit murder. A federal judge, it's unheard of, said yes, these police officers conspired to murder Willie McCoy. He had to come back just a few months ago after doing all his research and said that he had to drop that simply because of qualified immunity. So qualified immunity, the police officer's Bill of Rights, we have to change these things to where police officers who are not in a tough decision-making process. My oldest son was a police officer for a short time. So I'm not anti-police. Right. I'm anti-bad police. I'm anti-corrupt police. And I'm anti the corrupt systems which support these corrupt police. But I do agree with Etan that the police never should have been called to or showed up to my brother's situation that night. Right.
And you know, and what he's talking about, what he said he agrees, we go back and forth on it, where there's a chapter in my book called Defunding the Police. And everybody, you know, that phrase has been weaponized and transformed to mean so many different things, but it's very simple. It's that if you are not the person who is trained to handle a situation like a wellness call or a mental health crisis, then you're not that person who should be funded for that department. It should go to somebody else who is trained to be able to handle that situation. And I do believe that if that does happen, I don't even care what you call it. If you don't like the words defunding police, call it whatever you want to call it. It's just a matter of sending someone who is trained to deal with that situation to that place, so that you don't have a situation where there's no gun, there's no imminent danger, no anything, but they come with guns. You know what I mean? That somebody accidentally, you know, takes off their life alert or something like that, and you don't come banging on their door with guns and everything like that, like it's a big dramatic. That shouldn't happen. And those are the parts, Chris. And I want to go back to you, Chris. You know, when we have athletes talk about this, automatically, when you hear certain people twist and turn and lump what they're saying into something that was never said, was never created by them, anything like that. What is your advice to athletes who want to, because right now we're doing this whole HBCU tour, talking with athletes, you know, who want to speak out, who want to do, what is your advice to athletes and how to prepare themselves for what they're going to face when they do speak out?
Well, I think, like Craig pointed out, a good issue. We need to have some way we can link our athletes up with for various issues. It could be Black economists, Black educators, Black lawyers, Black politicians, people who are experts in these fields. As outspoken and as great as it to see a LeBron be outspoken and other athletes, I don't expect them to be necessarily experts in all these various fields, right? I mean, they're experts at their sport, but we need to link them up with the experts, Black or white, who have, you know, the right motives and can share these things with them, because most aren't going to have this information.
Right.
And so I think that's what has to happen. And we've lost that. And Craig mentioned, you know, back in the 60s when, you know, we all have the iconic photo of Ali and Jim Brown and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Bill Russell and all those guys. At that time, the Black community was forced to work together because we were segregated.
And liberal,
and now we're not forced to. So to be honest, we don't. And there shouldn't be such a disconnect between, you know, successful Black people.
That's
you
right.
know, so one thing when I see these things like what Kori and Kenneth are talking about, the murders of their family members, it just makes me feel like, you know, we have to, as Black people, we have to just be conscious of working together no matter what, no matter how successful we are, no matter how well a certain group of whites might treat us, we need to still realize, man, we need to work together, you know, because so much of this stuff is going on, and not be so enamored when we get mainstream success, not be so hypnotized by the success of American mainstream life or by whites liking us and speaking favorably of us and treating us nice that we forget our communities. And that happens too much. So I just think to answer your question, Etan, is we have to have a vehicle for linking up our athletes and entertainers with Blacks and others who are educated in these situations. And then they can help them make sure they have the right information and share with them possible solutions because our athletes and entertainers have the visibility and the connections to maybe get some things done that those with the real expertise in these fields may not have. So that combination together would be powerful.
That's a great point. And I think one of the best illustrations of that is what you saw with the relationship with Malcolm X and Muhammad Ali, you know, and if Muhammad Ali never met Malcolm X, he would have just been the greatest fighter ever. I'm messing up the quote a little bit, but that's what Layla Ali told me when I interviewed her for We Matter, for my book We Matter. And it was interesting just to see how just being able to nurture him and open his eyes to different things, you know, changes his whole outlook to where he becomes a totally different person. You know, Craig Hodges said, do you think that's possible to do in this day and age? As far as I think you and Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf and you know what I mean, even Kaepernick now. I mean, I think y'all have this ability and this respect, and you know, to be able to you know, kind of teach the masses of young athletes on how to use their voice and their platform, how to be educated, how to be able to know that, you know, once you do come up to something, there's going to be those people who are going to try to attack you to get, you know, trip you up, make you sound like you're ignorant, you don't know what you're talking about. So then you connect with the person, like you said, Chris, that is right there with you to be able to, okay, no, I'll take this one, and then you go with, and it's all strategically done, which then in turn helps the impacted family members, you know what I mean, because you're bringing what they're doing, what happened to them, onto your platform, out into the world, and that's when things start to get uncovered and people pay attention more to it. Is that possible to be able to create in this day and age?
I think at this point in time with social media, absolutely. I think what you're doing and what Chris is doing, and I think really we have to get our brothers who are and sisters who are in the sport at a given time to look to the elders, and we as elders be able to be in a position. You know, one of the things I was laughing about, I saw an article about the NBA social justice panel or something they have, and I just started laughing. I'm like, I didn't get a call, and that's when I'm looking at, do you really want to talk to someone like Mahmoud? I always tell people, yeah, my situation was one thing, but to me, what happened with Mahmoud was even more devastating for me as a pure basketball player, because I would have loved to see how many numbers he could actually put up. You know what I'm saying? As opposed to him having to, you know, not be able to finish his career in the manner in which he should have. So I know it's a possibility that we can do it, especially now we have the resources. You know, when me and Mahmoud went through our thing, it wasn't any social media.
Right.
All the media coverage was through whoever was connected to the teams. And they're not going to make any beef because they want to get interviews. So from that standpoint, I think, right now we are in the best position that we've ever been as a people, from the standpoint of having the expertise through all the given fields. But the biggest part for me is for the reality for us to really, really stop and think about who we are, where we came from, and galvanize on the point that, we're going into we're in the age of Aquarius now. And that all of us, as we sit here as brothers, the missing link is our woman. And that the sisters are back in the position of queenship like they should have been years ago. So now with the age of Aquarius, that's why we're seeing the leadership of women and especially sisters step to the plate. And we need that. We need that throughout the fabric of leadership within our communities, because they've been there and they've been that stalwart. So I'm looking forward to, whatever opportunities, like when you call me, brother, I'm with it. Same thing with you, Chris, is that, we at that point now in our history where we have the freedom and we have the power to define what we want to be, who we want to be. And as men, it's cool for us to be able to, sit and galvanize with sisters and hear where they're coming from, support what they're doing. And at the same time, raise up these young brothers in the mindset that, hey, don't be afraid to stand on truth. But the whole thing about it is you got to research it. It can't be a thing where you just going by what somebody says. Go and look into this thing where it becomes a part of who you are. So for me, to this day, I'm 62 times around the sun. I'm looking forward to continuing to be a student athlete. And I think that's where sometimes, like Chris was saying, we get enamored with, think about how many brothers when we was playing ball and saying, man, when I get to the league, I'm gonna come back and but now when we get to the league, we get the trappings of success of what it is to be almost white in America. And you wanna feel that, you wanna vibe that. But when you look into the reality of it, it's just a short period of time. And if you don't get that window of great opportunity as a superstar, then you better make sure that you have a nice connection to your people, man, because you're going to be coming back to see them whether you want to or not.
That's true. That's true. Well, listen, I want to thank y'all for sitting on this panel and having this discussion. It's amazing how quick time flies, and it's been an hour. But I really want to, say to you, Mr. Chamberlain Jr., Mr. McCoy, keep pushing. Your strength is incredible, and it's amazing, and you're inspiring other people. When people see this, other impacted family members, every time they see like one of y'all speak, they get inspired to be able to do the same thing. It's interesting, Chris. Let me just tell you this. You remember when we first when we did that panel that I was talking about for All-Star Weekend in New York right after Eric Garner was killed? So and remember I brought Emerald on. Emerald Garner was his daughter. Yep. And just to feel the love from everybody. Now, she was so nervous, scared. She didn't want to say anything. I told her when I was like, listen, you don't have to say anything. I just want you to feel the love. Like, you have to say a word. Right. If you want to say something during the event, give me a little sign or something, and I'll give you the mic. So we're doing the event. It was like right after Bizzle performed, and she gave me the little sign. I was like, okay, you ready? You sure? Gave her the mic. She just thanked everybody. It was real quiet and everything like that, and she got the standing ovation. And you saw the big smile on her face come, like she felt the support of the community. Now, after that, with the little bit that she spoke, she told me how Alton Sterling's son saw her speak there, and then he became inspired. And she was like, wait a minute, what do you mean you're inspired by me? I was nervous. I don't know what to say. I don't know what all this media coming. I'm trying to fight for, Danto Pantaleo to be fired. I don't know what to do. And he was like, no, but I see you, out there, now, being strong and standing in front of everybody. And now I have the courage to be able to, feel that it's going to be all right. And I can do it too. So I say that to tell you that you continuously doing what you're doing, Mr. Chamberlain and Mr. McCoy, inspires other impacted family members. And now Emerald is a whole activist. Like, she out speaking, she out, meeting with politicians, trying to she got the Eric Garner law passed. She did all this different stuff in New York, and it's amazing to see. So just really encouraging the impacted family members. That's what it's about, using our platform, using our, so-called celebrity, to be able to help, combine with them. And it's just really special. It's an honor to be blessed, to be in a position to be able to do that. That's so right. I just want to tell y'all, thank all of y'all for taking the time out, for this Black History Month, the last day of Black History Month panel. Keep fighting, and all y'all know, you call me, you know, we in this together. So we're gonna keep
no doubt,
pushing.
no doubt.
All right, cool. All right, clear. So thank y'all. Everybody have a good day and stay blessed and stay safe.
For sure.
All right, peace.
Peace.
Thank you guys again. Appreciate you.
Brother, I want to get your information too. Are we off already? Are we
Yeah, we're off. I was planning on giving everybody's information to everybody. I'll connect everyone. I got all the emails and everything. So I already know what y'all got, the wheels turning. You know, King movement you up. I saw it when he was talking. He was like, "Wait a minute, so I'm gonna connect everyone." Don't you worry.
Good.
All right, brother.
All right, y'all.
Have a good day.
All right. Yes,
Hey, Chris, hold up. Oh, Chris is gone.
Oh, he left. Yeah.
I was going to tell him, man, ask Steph Curry, what are you talking about in their prime? His 5 best was Larry Bird, Reggie Miller, Drazen Petrovic, Ray Allen, and Seth Curry.
Oh, and Seth, we got to give his brother props. You know, you got to give his brother props. His brother.
I get that.
That's his brother. But you got to be on that list, Craig. You got to be on that list.
Come on, man.
Ain't no question. You got to be on that list.
Brother Chamberlain. Hey, man. Brother, you got some support now.
Yeah, I'm going to connect all of y'all. I'm going to connect y'all. And that's how when you're connected, you're going to be connected.
I definitely appreciate you. I mean, when Etan did the flyer and I put the flyer out, there's people that's here, like international basketball players in the city of White Plains and stuff like that. And they saw, me talk about you guys, and they were like, well, how did you get them? And how did that happen? And I said, listen, I have a brother that know Etan who said something to him.
That's all it takes.
Out to me. I said, and that's it. And then they were like, Craig Hodges? You know?
All good, brother. All good, man.
So, that's why, like I said, like, it gets a little overwhelming for me. Because,
I hear you.
like I said, to get this support from you guys. I mean, I never had any athletes step up and say, let me help you. With the exception of this one brother out here in White Plains who played overseas, Tory Thomas. Thomas is the only person that was like, how can I help you? Tell me why. I don't have much, but tell me what you need me to do, and let me try to help you. So, but other than that, that's why, I'm like, I thank you, man. My family is grateful.
For sure. We're going to keep on pushing too. We got a lot of work to do.
All right.
All right. Peace.
Peace.
All right.